Have you ever heard of a story so wild, it sounds like a Hollywood movie? A tale of espionage, naval cat-and-mouse games, and a secret hidden in plain sight for decades. Today, we're diving deep into the incredible true story of when the US Navy trapped a Russian spy ship, and the world didn't even notice. This isn't your typical spy thriller. There are no dramatic explosions or high-speed chases across the open ocean. Instead, this is a story of quiet, calculated brilliance. A chess match played on the vast board of the Pacific Ocean during the height of the Cold War. It's a story that begins, of all places, in a peaceful Swedish archipelago. Our story kicks off in October 1981. The Cold War is frosty, to say the least. Tensions are high, and both the United States and the Soviet Union are constantly probing each other's defenses, gathering intelligence wherever they can. Suddenly, a Soviet Whiskey-class submarine, the S-363, runs aground deep inside Swedish territorial waters, just a stone's throw from a major naval base. The Swedes are, understandably, not pleased. The incident, dubbed Whiskey on the Rocks, becomes a huge international embarrassment for the Soviets. It reveals just how brazenly they were operating, but it also reveals something else: a vulnerability. The US Navy was watching. They saw how the Soviets reacted, how their surface ships scrambled to the scene, and how the whole situation unfolded. And an idea began to form in the minds of some very clever naval intelligence officers. What if they could orchestrate a similar situation, but on their own terms? What if they could lure a Soviet intelligence-gathering ship, known as an Aggie, into a trap not of steel and nets, but of geography and international law? The perfect location for this audacious plan was found in the Puget Sound, a complex and beautiful network of waterways in Washington state. At the heart of this sound is the Banga Naval Base, home to America's Ohio-class ballistic missile submarines, the crown jewels of the U.S. nuclear deterrent. These subs were, and still are, a top priority for Soviet, now Russian, intelligence. Soviet AG is often disguised as fishing trawlers, but bristling with antennas and electronic surveillance gear, would regularly patrol just outside the Strait of Juan de Fuca, the entrance to the Puget Sound. They'd linger in international waters, trying to hoover up any electronic signals, communications, or acoustic signatures from the submarines coming and going. Their mission was to build a library of data on these ultra-quiet boomers, making them easier to track in a potential conflict. The US Navy knew this, and they were tired of it. So they hatched a plan. The plan hinged on a small, seemingly insignificant body of water called the Carr Inlet. The Carr Inlet is a long, narrow finger of water that branches off the main part of Puget Sound. Crucially, it's considered internal waters of the United States. This is a key legal distinction. International law grants innocent passage through a country's territorial waters, which extend 12 nautical miles from the coast. This means foreign ships, including warships, can transit through these waters, as long as they're not conducting any threatening activities. But internal waters, bays, rivers, and inlets like Carr Inlet have no right of innocent passage. They are as much a part of the country as the land itself. The Navy's plan was simple, yet genius. They started subtly altering their submarine transit routes. Instead of sending their Ohio-class subs directly out to sea from Bangor, they began occasionally routing them down into the Carr Inlet for what they claimed were routine. Deperming procedures a process to reduce a ship's magnetic signature. Of course, the real purpose was to bait the trap. The Soviet Aggie crews, ever watchful, noticed this new pattern. Their mission was to follow the submarines. From their perspective, the subs were just moving from one part of the sound to another. They saw a US warship entering a waterway, and their orders were to follow and gather intelligence. So, they did. The Soviet Aggie would dutifully trail the American submarine down into the narrow confines of the Carr Inlet. And that's when the trap would spring. As soon as the Soviet ship was deep inside the inlet, a US Coast Guard cutter would appear. Seemingly out of nowhere, it would pull alongside the Soviet vessel, and its crew would politely inform the Soviet captain that he was in violation of US law by being in internal waters without permission. There was no shouting, no brandishing of weapons. It was all very professional. The Soviet captain would be presented with a choice: either be escorted out immediately or face arrest and the impounding of his ship. Imagine the shock and confusion on that Soviet bridge. One moment, they're on a routine surveillance mission. The next, they're cornered, deep inside enemy territory, with no legal leg to stand on. They had followed the sub right into a legal dead end. Of course, they always chose to be escorted out. To do otherwise would create a massive international incident and risk their highly sensitive ship and its equipment falling into American hands. As the Coast Guard cutter led the spy ship back out to international waters, the real prize was collected. U.S. Navy intelligence teams, positioned at strategic points along the shore, would be filming the entire event. But they weren't just getting vacation photos. They were using high-powered cameras and sensors to document every inch of the Soviet Augie. Every antenna, every radar dome, every port, and every modification was meticulously recorded. You see, getting a close, clear, well-lit look at one of these ships in the open ocean was incredibly difficult. But here, in the calm, protected waters of the Kar Inlet, the Navy was getting a full 360-degree inspection. They were essentially forcing the Soviets to pose for a detailed intelligence photo shoot. They learned what frequencies the ships used, the capabilities of their sensors, and even crew rotation patterns. It was an intelligence goldmine, handed to them by the Soviets themselves. This brilliant operation, known as Operation Solid Shield, or more informally as the Kar Inlet Trap, was run multiple times throughout the 19th. Each time, a different Soviet Aggie would fall for the same bait. Each time, the US Navy collected a treasure trove of invaluable data. And the most incredible part, it all happened in complete secrecy. This wasn't front-page news. It wasn't debated in Congress. The residents of Puget Sound, who saw these strange naval ballets playing out in their backyards, had no idea they were witnessing a covert intelligence operation. They just saw Navy ships and Coast Guard cutters escorting what looked like a Russian fishing boat. It was a secret, hidden in plain sight. The story didn't come to light until years later, in the early 2000s, when a former naval intelligence officer named Kurt Weldon, who later became a congressman, wrote about it in his memoirs. Only then did the public learn about this clever chapter of Cold War history. The Kar Inlet Trap is a masterclass in what's known as legal warfare. It wasn't about having bigger guns or faster ships. It was about using a deep understanding of international maritime law as a weapon. The US Navy used the Soviets' own intelligence-gathering doctrine against them, turning their greatest strength, their relentless pursuit of American submarines, into their greatest vulnerability. It's a reminder that the most effective strategies are often the quietest ones. In the silent world of submarine warfare and espionage, the smartest move isn't always the loudest. Sometimes, it's just a matter of knowing the map better than your opponent and patiently waiting for them to sail right into your trap. What an incredible piece of history, unfolding silently in the waters of the Pacific Northwest. Let me know in the comments if you've heard of any other amazing stories of intelligence operations like this one. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this deep dive into naval history, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more stories you won't find in the textbooks. See you next time.